Hi, this is Tom from Tommy B Photo, and in this video I'm going to share with you the technique I use to smooth skin in Photoshop. When I'm retouching skin, my goal is to smooth the skin to achieve a consistent tonality without calling attention to the technique itself. The technique I'm going to show you is great for smoothing out blotchiness caused by blood vessels under the surface of the skin. I know there are many plugins and techniques for smoothing skin like frequency separation, but in my opinion, you'll get the most mileage out of the way I'm going to show you. The technique can be used on all your photos, from headshots to full-length photos. So here we go. Now I selected this file of Andrea to illustrate this technique, and in my workflow, the first steps that I take is to make any fixes to the file. So this means removing blemishes, stray hairs, brightening the eyes, brightening the teeth, removing any distracting elements from the frame, and so on. Any kind of manipulations like using the liquify tool and things like that. Now I either have a layer above the background that all of these fixes are applied to, or there's a group of all these manipulations there. So in this particular file, there wasn't much to do. There were a few bruises on her legs and a couple of stray hairs, and I was able to do that all in one layer. So you could see I just cleaned up a couple of bruises in her leg, and then there were some stray hairs. Once you have the fixes done to your file and you're ready to begin the finishing process of the photo, I start with the skin smoothing. So above the fixes layer, I am going to make a stand visible layer. And to do that, I press Shift, Option, Command, and E. Now this is going to make a new layer, which comprises all the layers below it. So if you had a group of fixes that had 10 layers, all of those layers and the background layer will all be combined into one. I renamed that layer Skin, just to keep things organized. So once you have your stand visible layer, you're going to invert that. I just used the keyboard shortcut Command I to invert that, and you're going to get a negative of the image itself. Once I have the negative of the stand visible layer, I convert this for smart filters by going to Filter, Convert for Smart Filter. The reason I do this is that I might change my mind later on in the retouch process, and I'd want to go back and adjust my settings on this particular layer. If I didn't do that, all my settings would be baked in, and if I wanted to make a change later, I'd have to delete this layer and then start the skin technique all over again. So once that is changed to for smart filters, I'm going to change the blend mode of that layer to vivid light, and your image will turn gray at that point. So to this stand visible layer that's been inverted and changed to vivid light, I'm going to apply two filters. The first filter is a high pass filter. So we go Filter, Other, High Pass. So your image will reappear, but it will look very blurry and kind of blotchy. I set the radius to 12.5. That usually works for me. The resolution of your camera will affect that setting. Mine's 16 megapixels, but if you have one of the higher resolution cameras, 12.5 should be a good starting point. And then just click OK. To this layer, I'm going to add another filter, this time a Gaussian blur. So I go Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur. And on this filter, I set the radius to 2.5. Now you can actually see that this filter sharpens it a little bit. This keeps your edge sharpness in the technique. It's kind of counterintuitive to have a blur sharpen your image, but it does. Okay, so now that I have the effect built on this layer, I'm going to conceal it with a mask by holding down the Option key and clicking on the new mask icon button in the bottom of the panel. That will give me a black mask to conceal the technique. If I didn't hold Option, that would be a white mask, and then I would have to either invert it or fill it with black. So holding Option saves you a step there. So once you're at this point, we want to reveal the technique, the effect on the skin. So I'm going to take my brush tool with white at 100% flow and paint on the mask to reveal it. Now I'm going to zoom in here just slightly. I held down Command and hit 1 to zoom into 100%. So I'm going to adjust my brush. Now to adjust your brush, I'm using a tablet. You hold down Control and Option, and then you drag your pen left and right, and that will change the size of your brush tip. If I went up and down, that would change the hardness of my brush. So I'm going to be a short brush, soft brush, kind of medium, and I'm just going to paint this in all over the skin. Now you don't have to be precise with this. I'm going to go back after this, and then we're going to refine the edge of this mask. To move around on your photo, just hold the space bar and then just drag around, and it's a lot easier than using those sliders on the edge of the panel. So I'm going to paint this effect in on all of the exposed skin, and it looks like we got it pretty good. So just to point out some issues with this technique that you need to be aware of. Now when we go to refine this mask, you'll notice that there's areas in here where pixels from the dress got moved onto her leg, as well as pixels from her leg onto the dress. And you could see this happening in the creases of her knee. It happens on her hands, on her fingers. You see that some of the red from her lips gets moved onto her skin, on her chin there. So you have to be aware of how this effect behaves in order to fix the mask. So I'm going to switch my colors on my brush to black by hitting X. And I'm going to go around the edge of this, the perimeter, and just knock that mask back a bit. Now what I'm concerned with is the feathered edge of the brush tip. The white circle represents the halfway mark between where the brush flows at 100% and 0%. So I'm basically just using the outer edge beyond the circle to push the effect back just enough to get rid of where the pixels bleed onto the skin. So I'm going to follow this around the whole perimeter to get this pushed back here. Now I'm doing this quickly for the tutorial, but normally I would spend a good amount of time to make sure this is perfect. So this first pass, we're just going around the perimeter to make sure that we get rid of the pixels bleeding onto the skin. Alright, so at this point I'm going to address the other areas where I'm going to use the flow at 100%, where I don't want any of this effect on the skin at all. And that's mainly the lips and the eye area. So I'm going to come in here and get rid of the effect on the lips, the eyebrows, the eyelashes. I'd also go through and get rid of the effect on any kind of buttons, zippers, jewelry, anywhere where I didn't want this effect at all. Okay, so the next step would be to come in and blend some of these other areas. But what I do is I lower the flow of the brush down to 20%. So how I did that is I held shift and then just hit number 2 and it'll adjust the flow. Otherwise, you could just use the scrubby slider or key in what you want. But 20% shift and 2. And I'm going to adjust my brush size, and I'm just going to come in here and blend this in. I'm going to come down the ridge of the nose, free up some of these shadows. Also, I go around the mouth because some of those red pixels will bleed onto the skin. The fingers and the toes. Also, notice these tendons in the hand. You don't want to have those covered up and not visible, because then your model will start looking plasticky, and that doesn't look good. Always adjusting your brush to the area that you want to remove the effect from. So I'm going to go in all the creases of the body, whether it's where the arm bends, the back of the knee, in the neck there's some areas. And the more you do this, the more practice you'll get, the better you'll get at doing this technique. Okay, so that's, oh, and if the model has tattoos, you definitely want to brush over the tattoos so the colors will not bleed into each other. So at this point, we have the effect built, we have a mask, and we're revealing the technique, the softening technique on the skin. And I'm just going to hide it and show it to you so you can see the difference here. That's before, and that's after. So you can see kind of like that blotchiness gets concealed. Now at 100%, the effect is too strong for my taste. I normally bring this down to around 60%. And that gives, in my opinion, a good amount of the effect without really calling attention to itself. And you can see there's still a lot of detail in the skin. However, the blotchiness is removed, and it really makes an impact on the photo, in my opinion. So that is that. That's how the effect is done. That's how the skin is smoothed out. At this point in the retouch, I would just do some finishing, dodging, and burning. I'll come over to my original file here to show you. So I started with my background layer that I brought in from Lightroom. I applied any fixes to the file. In this particular case, with some bruises in her legs, but this might mean, stray hairs, blemishes, whitening the teeth, using the liquify tool, any of that kind of file manipulation I do. If it's in multiple layers, I'll put it in a group. At that point, I'll begin the skin smoothing technique, like I described before. So there's the skin on and off. You can see it smoothed it. And then from there, I just finish with some dodging and burning on the skin. Bring out the three-dimensionality. A little dodging and burning on the hair. Bring out the highlights. Same with the jacket. I reduce the exposure in the top left on this frame just a bit. And I increase the overall brightness of the image. And put the watermark on. And that is how you smooth skin in Photoshop for glamour photography. Hope you learned something. If you did, please share it. Also, if you enjoyed it, put a little comment at the bottom. And happy shooting.